Hi, this is Josh Lawler, attorney and leader of the Emerging Technologies Group at Lawler. I help clients navigate the complex legal landscape of emerging technology. You're tuned into The Edge of NFT, the show that helps you navigate the future of all things Web3. Keep listening.
Welcome to The Edge of NFT, the podcast that brings you the top 1% of Web3 today and what will stand the test of time. We explore the nuts and bolts of the business side and also the human element of how Web3 is changing the way we interact with the things we love. This podcast is for the dreamers, disruptors, and doers who are pumped about this ecosystem and driving where it goes next.
Welcome to The Edge of NFT, the podcast created by Jeff Kelly, Ethan Jenny, and Josh Krieger, featuring a variety of top-notch guests and other hosts like myself, Richard Carthon.
It's another production of the Edge of Company, a quickly growing media ecosystem empowering the pioneers of Web3 tech and culture and responsible for other groundbreaking endeavors like the Outer Edge Innovation Festival in LA and Riyadh.
Today's sponsored episode features Josh Lawler, who specializes in mergers and acquisitions and securities law, focusing on emerging industries like cannabis and distributed ledger technology. He works with the private equity groups, companies, and international clients across 20 countries, handling complex cross-border transactions. Lawler is one of the most selective firms in the U.S., representing clients throughout the world from 8 offices across the world. Lawler focuses on mergers and acquisitions, finance, IPOs, intellectual property, antitrust, data privacy, FDA, anti-corruption, and other regulatory work and litigation.
Hi, Josh. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Always great to have you on and get into more of the legal nuts and bolts of our industry. It's fun to talk about the technology and the innovation and the art, but someone's got to pay attention to what's going on behind the scenes to keep these companies operating smoothly.
Absolutely.
I don't know if we've actually talked about your journey that got you into law before and what inspired you to focus on emerging technologies like blockchain and AI in the first place.
My undergrad in college was biopsychology and history with a minor in genetics. And at the time, and when I started thinking about law, I was thinking about something that we were calling medical ethics law, and it was all about stem cells and DNA and cloning, except since I went to college sometime in the 1700s, that didn't really exist yet. I'm kidding, of course, but it's still very junior stuff. And medical ethics law was really about health insurance at the time, and that turned out not to really be super interesting. But I've been a futurist forever. All the stuff that I consume, huge cyberpunk junkie on top of it. And I've been fortunate that my partners and some of my best friends really share those interests. We're all kind of longevists, and we all look at things that are new and interesting and try to make it work in the world, if you will. And it's really, you had mentioned needing to look at the law and not always the technology and everything, but that's actually a little bit backwards. The first thing you have to look at is the technology and understand it. I'm not going to say you have to necessarily love it, but it helps a lot. And when you're looking at the technology and you're looking at the technology applications and getting excited about it, that's then, if you have an underlying understanding of legal, regulatory, and everything else, that's when things get really interesting. That's when you're able to really get things done, because using securities laws as an example, I've been a securities attorney for 30 years. And it's okay, there's policies behind the letter of the law. It's at its root, it's consumer protection, which is a laudable policy. And 2017, the SEC jumped in during ICO mania. That was the right move because people were getting killed. It was ridiculous. It was exactly what was happening in the 1920s that got this stuff put in place to begin with. The only problem is that nobody knew what a token was. Nobody kind of had that in their head, and some idiot decided ICO was a good term for sending something out, and it sounds like IPO. So we got the SEC that jumped in, and then they realized that they really didn't have everything figured out, and in fact, the law is contradictory, leads to oxymoronic conclusions and all kinds of ridiculousness. So they couldn't give any guidance, because if they give any guidance, then people like me are just going to figure out ways around stuff, which is what happens. And here we are 7 years later, and I think we're finally getting close to legislation that may make some sense at the SEC level. But getting back to the point, my own journey, I'm an evangelist for the technology now. I just see so many problems in the world that can be helped, not necessarily cured, but helped from a perspective of putting distributed ledgers and spreading information out and really disintermediating a lot of fat in a lot of processes. And that's interesting to me because it's also opportunity. If you make things easier for people to access information, you make them less costly, then some people who are maybe not entirely disenfranchised, somewhat crushed, not able to get into the upper end of the current system, well, they got a different system to go after. They can do an end around. And of course, that's horribly frightening to any centralized government. Again, that leads to situations we're in anyways. But thank you for asking. I don't get asked that very frequently.
Yeah, and it's exciting to hear. It's clear your passion comes up. One of the things I enjoy every time we talk is just like how passionate you are about the space. And like you said, you don't necessarily have to love the technology, but understanding how it works and then being able to eloquently speak to it and break it down depending on who's your audience, right? Whether you need to make it very simple or you can get very technical. You've always been able to balance both. And you talked about timeline, right? I want to go back to a timeline. So for all those listeners out there, as Josh has been on the show before, he came out on an episode that released earlier this year, back in February. And a lot has happened since February. We've had a Bitcoin ETF go live. We've also had an Ethereum ETF go live. We've also had several other things happen that we're going to probably address throughout the course of today's conversation. But one of the things I wanted to do to kick off today's conversation is just what are the most recent challenges that you're starting to see with both the blockchain and crypto companies that you're currently speaking to that are coming up?
Wow. All right. So first off, thank you, because that was extremely generous, and I'm humbled to hear myself talked about that way. I really enjoy working with you guys also for a lot of the same reasons, but that was fantastic. So to your question, what challenges? I don't want to get political per se, but I will tell you that the impending election in November is top of almost everybody's mind, because the perception, and it may or may not actually happen this way, but the perception is that you have a binary switch. And if one particular party wins, particularly if it's a clean sweep and they win Congress also, you're going to see major obstacles to distributed ledger technology from a wholesale perspective. And then if the other side wins, you're likely to see a lot of money enter the space. And I'm not going to say that I prefer one side to the other, honestly, and for a variety of reasons, I'm not sure I do. But it's definitely, if you look at all the development stage companies, everybody who's looking for fundraising, everybody who's wondering, okay, should this be equity oriented? Should this be token oriented? Because if one side wins, equity is going to be much more favorable. And if the other side wins, tokens may end up being much more favorable. It's got everybody kind of buzzing around that. And there is nothing bigger right now than that.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's definitely on everyone's minds, whether or not they are expressing it or not. We're all watching to see what happens there. But there's also an interesting new piece of context, which is the Ripple damage award, which we talked about recently on the show. It's definitely made some waves. And I guess my question to you is what do you think people should pay attention to when it comes to this verdict?
The thing that is number one with a bullet is the fact that it happened, because that starts the timeline for the SEC to appeal some of the earlier parts of the decision. And with the Ripple piece, the violation of securities law that may or may not have happened in terms of them selling tokens to funds and high-end accredited investors, that's nothing. And I'll get to that in a second, why it's nothing. The big thing was the programmatic sale decision, where Ripple was selling via centralized exchanges about 1% of the daily volume of Ripple. And the court found that did not create a securities issue because nobody knew that they were actually buying from Ripple. No investment contract possible, no Howey analysis to turn the Ripple token into a security. And that was a very big deal. And the SEC has now tacitly admitted that tokens are not securities, tokens are software code, something we all have known. And if you look at the Coinbase case, the judge there has just done backflips to try to not dismiss that by creating what I can only call a Kafka-esque type of interpretation, which I'll kill that digression and get back to Ripple. First off, the award, no disgorgement. The SEC asked for $2 billion. And that was based on the idea of these guys brought in $2 billion or whatever it was, and there's penalties and there was everything else. Ripple countered with, we should pay $10 million. which is obviously nothing in context. And the court ended up at 100, and I think it was 125 or something in that vicinity. So first off, recognize that Ripple's legal fees were 20x that. Sounds like a big number. For me, it's a big number. I would love to have made that 125 million somehow. But in context of what we're talking about, it's a slap on the wrist. That's an unqualified win. And the reason for that is because the court went, nobody was hurt. Nobody who you guys sold to illegally was hurt. Disgorgement isn't there. That's where that went. But like I said, the bigger thing is it triggers a timeline for the appeal. And the appeal is massive. That decision, if it stands, and notably if it gets upheld at higher court levels, that is the game for the SEC. It really is. And I'm not shy to say it's a game that they should lose because they're just wrong. And it doesn't mean I don't want regulation. We need to have regulation. Consumer protection is important. But the fact of the matter is that you can't regulate a non-financial product as if it was a financial product. And for everybody out there who understands securities laws are difficult, the reason they're hard, the reason like where the rubber meets the road here, and it's in the Coinbase action right now, is if it's a security, then none of the regulated entities that are allowed to do things with securities, the broker dealers, the exchanges, the clearing agencies, none of them can do anything with a security unless there are certain public filings made, your 10Ks and Qs. If you're not a public filer, there's something called a 15C211 that FINRA has. And that includes audited financial statements. So your profit and loss statement, your balance sheet. And those can't happen with respect to projects that don't have an underlying profit motive. If you're a token that's released by a foundation, like you're not trying to make a profit, you're a nonprofit. People are making money based on the token supply and demand value proposition, but that's it. So anyways, I'm getting very deep into the weeds, but the point is that appeal on Ripple getting going, that's a big deal. That's a light at the end of the tunnel a little bit.
Yeah. And I appreciate you breaking that down for us, because one of the challenges that I think has come up throughout the space has been disadvantages in being a first mover, right? And not only when you are a first mover, if you're a first mover and you become a large entity, obviously the SEC tries to go after you. So you have stuff that's going on with Ripple, you have Coinbase, you have some of these other companies, but there's a lot of companies that are innovating and wanting to be first in different ways and have steered clear and decided to not move forward because of potential missteps. When you're looking out, what are some of the new legal challenges on the horizon that you think people should potentially be aware of? And what's the top strategy of startups to stay ahead of that?
Sure. On the securities front, which is, of course, got everybody's attention, the reality is that if you do a capital raise in the United States, it's going to be treated as a securities transaction. And if you're doing it with something that is a token or token derivative, then you have to figure out how and when it becomes not a security so that it can get liquid and be traded on exchanges. Because as I just mentioned, you're not going to be doing financial statements, and that's what otherwise is necessary. That takes some planning. A lot of what we do now involves coordination of a United States operating company with a Cayman Foundation that owns a BVI entity that issues tokens, or the Marshall Islands is getting more and more popular with its MyDAO structure, which is the Marshall Islands grabbed Delaware law for the most part and made it a little bit more token friendly and a little bit less expensive, candidly. And it's not a bad way to go. Switzerland used to serve that purpose and is still serving it in some ways, but it's just very expensive. Planning that out ahead is always key. And the problem is everybody who's got a startup is short of cash. And this is expensive. This is heavy lifting from a legal perspective. And think about what we're talking about here. This is sets of lawyers. I can't do things in the Marshall Islands or Cayman or BVI by myself. We've got to bring somebody who's licensed there to do that. So there's time involved and there's expense involved. Now, with that said, I'm hopeful that whole situation is going to improve in the relatively near future, because I think we're going to get some legislation that's going to change the way we look at things from a securities perspective, which is going to, in turn, not make us push things overseas as much. That's the whole point, is stop pushing innovation to other countries. What I think is going to be the big issue then is tax. And I would encourage everybody who is doing anything to recognize that all income is taxable. And there are certain exceptions and structures you can use to try to delay things or make it feel a little bit better. But all income is taxable. And that includes not only your token sale, it also includes if you are trying to distribute revenue to token holders and they're in the United States, You've got tax reporting obligations. They've got tax reporting obligations. It's a mess. And unfortunately, the IRS is actually really, I think, within their authority to make it a mess. They do have the mandate to figure out how all that stuff works. Absent Congress coming out with a very novel new kind of tax code and system, we're living with that one. So again, that requires a lot of focus above and beyond the usual startup issues of intellectual property and things of that nature.
Yeah, fascinating perspective. Let's turn our attention actually to the intellectual property side of things and to what extent IP law supports blockchain innovation at this moment in time, and what steps can blockchain companies take to strengthen their IP protections under the current environment?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. We're in a space that has philosophically adopted open source technology a lot. That's, for anybody who's not aware, that's the opposite of protecting. You're basically publishing something out and saying, world, use this. And it's not new to blockchain. If you look at Linux and Red Hat and such, like there's a definite strategy of you put the main building blocks out there so people can adopt it, and you make your money having a company that does things within that space. So you build the hardware, the software, or whatever it's going to be. And I think that's a really solid move because honestly, computer code and things of that nature are very hard to protect anyways. It's easy to design around. What you might think of if you are a startup is that is not the case for trademark. Your trademark's very important, particularly if you're consumer facing in some way. And we've been spending a lot of time with clients trademarking various designations of where things are coming from. And it's hard because the international classes, again, like everything else, are not designed for blockchain, but you're squeezing into downloadable software. And it's okay. There's a world of difference between a blockchain kind of application and a token and somebody's SaaS program for keeping track of the tips at a restaurant or whatever it is. But to the Patent Trademark Office, that's downloadable software. It's the same stuff. So we get very creative in figuring out how to define that. And that, again, holds internationally. So for anybody who's not aware, the way trademark works is you file it in the United States and there are treaties to other countries, but you have to file and get it in those countries as well. And they don't all get it either. So that's challenging, but it's super important because your trademark you can actually protect. And then the other piece of this is trade secret is important. If you've got something that is the secret sauce and you can keep it to yourself, then that makes a lot of sense. And trademarks a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you let everybody know about it, it's not going to be a trade secret. If you lock it up in the proverbial file that only a few people have the key, that's great evidence to do that. And if you're on that road, I'd highly suggest talking to legal counsel early because you can make mistakes that you can't go back from in trade secret. But it's an interesting thing. Your ethic is an open distributed ledger. Like that means open. People are running nodes. It's kind of like the whole point is to have people you don't even know who are participating. If you look at all the smart contracts, they're publicly, like, nobody's writing a smart contract that's proprietary. It's not even possible. So that's where we are with IP.
Yeah, and I think one of the other subjects around IP that people also start to think around is the subject of meme coins. And at the time of this recording, as of a couple of days ago, McDonald's actually got their Instagram hacked by a scammer doing a meme coin where basically they collected $700,000 in a short amount of time. And for all of the positives of meme coins, you also have the negatives like that example. So for all of the non-bad actors out there, what do you think are the biggest legal challenges facing meme coin creators right now?
It's a thought process, really. You've got the granddaddy of all meme coins in Doge. And the person who put Doge out did it as a joke. There was no profit motive to that. And for a lot of reasons, it's been adopted heavily in its coin market cap top 10 or close to it at a given day. But the thing is, then that got copied. Really, Shiba Inu is the first one that I looked at and went, okay, that's the real Doge copycat. And that got a lot of success. And I'm not going to comment on how they got there, but it got a lot of success. And then you've got everybody walking in. You're now in a dynamic that I think we see more and more in all kinds of contexts, which is that law cannot keep up with technology. And because law can't keep up with technology, there are always going to be things that are not illegal, but are immoral. And the meme coin universe, I think, has become a real magnet for that. And we represent a number of meme coins as clients, and we talk to market makers who make markets in meme coins. And the idea that it's not anything, that it's Doge, really, it's just not right. Because if you're putting out a meme coin now, you have to market it. You have to community manage it. There is definitely, in that Howie sense, there's an efforts of others element to it that almost nobody putting out a meme coin wants to think exists. That's part of it. And then the other piece is there are certain kind of infrastructure protocols that are making their hay by being a platform for meme coins. Again, nothing against Solana particularly, but Solana is meme coin central. If you look at all the activity on Solana, it's meme coins, and that gets them a lot of activity and total value locked in transactions and everything else. And Solana's obviously done very well. But as a lover of the technology and what it can do, I just always have a problem with it. I feel this is the stuff that's distracting from the real use cases. Don't hate me, clients.
On that point, one common debate online is what's better, a meme coin that adds utility or a meme coin that just stays a meme coin for perpetuity. And I think these roadmaps for the meme coin projects evolve, and some of them end up wanting to do TV content and all sorts of interesting things and physical products. Does adding that onto a project that didn't start that way later create additional complexity in terms of building the road?
Yeah, here's the thing. Where that takes place, and again, I don't have anybody in particular in mind, it's when somebody gets success and then goes, now what? And there are certain things that are very low-hanging fruit. Licensing for merchandise and content generation are low-hanging fruit. If you already have big secondary meaning in the marketplace, there's already a lot going. So I don't know who runs Pepe, but I'm going to pick it because it's there and because I still regret the fact that I didn't buy it 2 years ago because I have trouble buying meme coins. I have no idea how it got popular. I have no idea how it pulled itself out of the sea of all the other meme coins, but it did. To a point now, Pepe is recognizable, and therefore Pepe can be licensed. None of that value really goes to the meme coin holders. Recognize that for what it is. Nobody holding Pepe is getting revenue from the licensing deal. They may benefit by the Pepe token becoming more valuable because more people see it, but that's it. I think if you've got a meme coin token that starts out with a roadmap for utility, it's not a meme coin token at that point. That's a token. Like the meme coin definition almost has to be, it's a meme. We're going to get a widespread because whatever we do, I'm angry, grumpy pussycat or whatever the heck I am. And people just find it so interesting for whatever reason that it's going to virally explode and frankly disappear after 15 minutes. And then the other angle we have here is now it's become a political tool for fundraising. And that's an interesting side path because people usually make donations for fundraising. They're not looking to make money off of their fundraising, off of their political donation. They're doing it because they believe in something. So if you've got a candidate that's putting out meme tokens and selling them, I'm okay with that because it is within the bounds of what is normal, which is you are getting nothing. You're getting this token. That's great. Put it someplace and it's considered a thank you. It shouldn't be sold as something that's going to have value on an ongoing basis. That's where the line's drawn. And sorry, I know I rambled a little bit there, but
no, all good. It's really helpful information in ways that like people can understand, like how are they structuring this potential? Like if someone was going to create a meme, what does that really mean from a legal standpoint? How can they protect themselves? And like how potentially do they get to a sustainability aspect without not worrying about if legally someone's about to come after them in various ways and what roadmaps could look like. I don't think it was a ramble. I think you did a good job of painting various scenarios that happen and that people don't necessarily think through before they make their meme. But there's another area that has even more mania, in my opinion, as things are moving forward, which is the cross intersection between AI and crypto. And Obviously, there's a lot that's happening outside of just the world of Web3. You look at companies like NVIDIA that are one of the fastest growing companies in the world that hyper focus on AI. And then when you look at just the market in general over the last year, some of the highest performers are the cross intersection between Web3 and AI. So the question I want to pose is, what do you think are the critical areas that companies that are focusing on this should focus on to ensure innovation isn't stifled and they have legal protections?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you. This is, in my mind, at least, extraordinarily important topic from a public kind of protection perspective. It would be, in my humble opinion, very bad for there to be a lockup of artificial intelligence at the major tech companies, and that's the only one who can use it. And that is a danger. We had the Biden executive order that came out that was saying this is what we're thinking, and there were massive reporting requirements in terms of keeping tabs on everybody who's using artificial intelligence. That looks a lot like what was happening with cryptography a couple decades ago before that was open sourced. And there are some blockchain projects that are specific to distributed artificial intelligence and access to artificial intelligence power for whatever apps you're going to build on top of it. And I think it's spectacularly important. A few of them projects that David Johnston and Eric Voorhees are doing is getting a lot of traction, and I think is very important. I think it's important that this is a global resource also. You've got that, and I should mention like Singularity.net is one of our clients. They just did their deal with Fetch, and that's artificial intelligence oriented as well. There's a few others. But I think in the fightforfreedom.org sense of things, this is humanity. This is where we're making our decisions of what kind of individual freedoms are we going to have. Because if it's locked up with just the high-end users, you're going to be paying a SaaS license fee forever, and you're going to have somebody keeping track of what you do with it. And that's a form of dystopia. Now, by the way, artificial intelligence, freely usable by everybody, also a form of dystopia. It's a delicate thing. But for anybody who's listening who's particularly blockchain focused, the projects are there, and there's some that are very worthy.
A quick word from our sponsors who's ready to navigate the cutting edge of tomorrow's legal landscape. Because at Zuber Lawler, they're not just attorneys, they're visionaries. With expertise in emerging technologies like AI, blockchain, and the metaverse, they're paving the way for you to seize the future. For mergers and acquisitions to IP, their selective team delivers strategic solutions tailored to the ever-changing world of technology. Join us at Zuber Lawler, where the future meets the law at zuberlawler.com. Back to the episode.
Appreciate your perspective there on that balance, and it seems you haven't figured out what that sweet spot is, both within the US and globally in terms of balancing innovation and enforcing protections around IP and blockchain. I will say I'm a big fan of the tool Perplexity AI. I don't know if you've tried that one, Josh.
I haven't, because I'm actually old enough to still know how to program a VCR. So, like, my understanding of everything conceptually is great. I execute somebody in their 50s, which is I am.
I will say Perplexity AI may or may not have helped us prepare or run a show for this conversation with you. And what it does do, though, that I think is important, is it cites sources for the data, that it combs the internet, combines it with its own library, and tells you where it got its facts from, which is a novel but important, I think, part of sort of the intersection of blockchain and AI, proof of source of data authority. And I think it's a really interesting opportunity that Medha Pawalkar, shout out to her from Casper Labs, mentioned on an early show as one of the great opportunities that blockchain brings to
I'm taking
AI
a note
IP.
to make sure I check that out a little bit later. Yeah, it's key. There's no putting the AI genie back in the bottle. And as mentioned many times before, blockchain is really about information for the masses. And you want that there. I think you want that there anyways.
Absolutely. Are there any sort of misconceptions or myths around blockchain law that we haven't touched on yet on this show or in previous conversations that you just wanted to hit on? I find some of the information that you share, like we recently had you on our Hot Topic show, which will also come out, and learning about how you really have to protect NFTs. that if you're doing a generative collection by actually filing a patent on each one, which can get quite expensive, right? $65 each. So to think about it, if you want to give yourself true protection, are there other sort of gotchas out there in terms of blockchain law that come up frequently in conversations with
Yeah,
potential?
the biggest thing, honestly, is that people use a lot of terms without precision, and some of them are pet peeves. Staking is, one of the most obvious examples. It originally comes from the idea that if you're running compute resources, you're running a node, you're putting something at stake that can be slashed if you're a bad actor, if you don't show up one day, and that's staking. What staking is not, but 99% of the population now uses it for, is depositing something and getting some kind of an APR. That's depositing something. That's investing. And so many projects come in, and I ask, what's the use case for the token? And they go, okay, you can stake it. And this is what we're giving. And I'm sitting here like, you're not an infrastructure project. Is anybody providing any kind of compute resource? No. And so the only reason you're staking is because it helps with the total value locked, which is a KPI that a lot of people look at, and it helps with supply demand by sucking up some of the supply. And the answer is yes. And that's not really a use for a token. Like, the token doesn't need to exist for just that. That's maybe my version of a rant on it, but that's one thing, is that element. I think a lot of people need to recognize how volatile the markets are. And we had a couple of years ago real problems because a lot of these NFT projects sold and they received BTC or they received ETH at a value at a particular date, and they held it. They didn't convert to fiat. And then the BTC and ETH markets dropped, and suddenly they've got a giant tax bill based on a valuation that was huge at the time they got the money, the value, I should say, not money. Those types of things are really gotchas that people need to look out for. And by the way, it's hard. I don't mean to be preaching to anybody that they're a bad person if they missed any of these things. This is really hard to really see where everything is. Educate yourself as much as you can, but bring in professionals. Plan to bring in professionals. That's the advice.
No, I appreciate all that. And it's been great to have these conversations on the show and in our newsletter. For those that subscribe to our newsletter, you can check out more perspective from Josh on this space. I think that there's a lot of fun to be had here. There's a lot of breakthroughs, but we do need to think about these different nuances of what happens when technology travels to uncharted waters, and how do companies protect themselves? How do consumers protect themselves? How do we maximize the benefits of innovation while keeping our seatbelts on, right? That's what it's all about. Thanks as always for being a partner and coming to join us on the show today amongst your busy schedule and before your adventures in Burning Man. We'll see you out at Token 2049. You'll probably find us and Josh at many of the same events. So if you find us, you're like, where's Josh? We'll point him out. And if you find Josh, he'll tell you where the other Josh is.
Absolutely. And really enjoy our conversations greatly. And I hope people are finding them helpful.
And now for a quick word from our sponsor before we dive into the next segment. Are you ready to take your sports predictions to the next level? Look no further than maincard.io, the fantasy management platform that's taking the blockchain world by storm. With MainCard, every card is a ticket to excitement. You can predict sport outcomes, trade cards in the marketplace, and challenge opponents in thrilling weekly duels. And don't wait. Head to maincard.io now and start earning rewards with your NFTs, because it pays to be early. And now back to today's episode.
Absolutely. Just for reference, where can our listeners and viewers go to learn more about you and what Zuber
Sure.
Lawler is all about?
Our website is www.zuberlawler.com. And yeah, not HTTPS. We're that old. We've been around for a while. My Twitter handle is JLawlerCal. And that's actually also where I tend to end up on WhatsApp or on Telegram as well. And Telegram I'm really adopting Telegram more and more, honestly. That seems to be just a really great platform as far as its user interface, which, like I said, I can program a VCR, so the user interface has to be very easy.
Right on. Thanks, Josh, again for joining us. We've reached the outer limit at the edge of NFT for today. Thanks for exploring with us. We've got space for more adventures on the Starship. So invite your friends and recruit some cool strangers. They'll make this journey all so much better. How, if you're listening, go to Spotify or iTunes and rate us and say something awesome. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, join over 130,000 other followers by hitting the subscribe button passing this episode on to a friend or two. You can also now catch us on myco.io. That's myco.io, where you can watch and earn for your time and attention. Lastly, be sure to tune in next time for more great Web3 content. Thanks again for sharing this time with us today.
The views and opinions expressed on Edge of NFT reflect solely those views and opinions of the show hosts and its guests. Please make sure to do your own research. Our show is not financial advice. You understand that you are using any and all information available on or through this podcast at your own risk. Whenever making financial decisions, we recommend doing your own research and talking to your accountant for financial advice. From time to time, we may feature sponsored content on the show for which we receive value, and we may share links for which we receive a commission if you make a purchase through one of those links. Refer to our website, www.edgeofnft.com, for our full disclaimer, terms and conditions, and privacy policy.